The Paintbox isn't even known. When they designed the Paintbox, the whole point was that nobody knew that something was created using a computer. So the whole point of the Paintbox was to do a better version of everything that was done manually. So the Paintbox is underrated because people don't understand it. And they, on purpose, were kept away from the knowledge that the Paintbox was involved in creating what you saw on the screen. Yeah, it's underrated because it's also a commercial product. So the Paintbox was created for television, and people tend to look down on television. If you won an Oscar compared to an Emmy, people always look down on that, sadly, and they always will. There's a hierarchy in visual moving images, and the Paintbox was completely video to begin with. It obviously was then higher resolution and did Photoshop and film, but originally it was for video. It completely revolutionized everything that we saw on the screen everywhere in the world. Everything became Paintbox generated just because it was cost effective. You could do more interesting things. So it would be the equivalent of going from a water wheel to a steam engine. That was the big jump. Everything that people are talking about now with AI, for instance, is the equivalent jump from 1981, going from analog to digital television that we watched. Any pioneering technology is annoying. Just because we're used to something doesn't mean it's old-fashioned. It means it works. A pen, chopsticks. The Paintbox was designed that you can just pick up a pen. It was really user artist friendly, but it also had to fit into a structure of what people expected and understood. So you imagine going to somewhere that never seen an iPhone and saying, "Oh, I've got an app, I've developed an app." People will be like, what the heck is an app? I have no clue what it is, how it will fit into the world. So Paintbox was annoying in some ways because people didn't know what it did. You had to explain absolutely everything, but it was absolutely liberating because you could suddenly do things at a stroke of a pen that would have needed all these skills and artisan craftsmanship that you didn't need to learn that anymore, because the Paintbox could do lettering and graphics and animation, etc., and photo retouching just with a swipe of a pen. So it was incredible, really. It was definitely a new instrument. And I don't know whether you really understood whether it was going to be so big. I mean, I was manipulating photos in 1984, and I remember doing a promo, and I just called it new photography. And at the time, there was no name for it. There was not Photoshop. People did call things Paintboxed, but this was kind of further down the line. So I just called it new photography because it seemed like a new way of doing photography. Now, I wouldn't say I was prescient or wise or anything, but when you look at it, at how photography was until we could digitally manipulate photography, and certainly the launch of digital photography itself, which was a later connotation of that, it really is a completely new media, really. Digital photography and digitally manipulated photography, which is everything we see now, is digitally manipulated imagery. So yeah, I didn't realize we were going into this whole new era where all the things I was learning at college about chemicals and f-stops and everything, nobody needs to know any of that now. So it's kind of, it's funny that I was at the forefront of it, but I didn't realize. And so, yeah, I could stand here and say, oh yes, I thought this would be how it would be in the future. And I was a revolutionary, marching through this wilderness, creating, putting flags down and markers and everything. But at the time, I was just doing it because it was fun. Back then, you didn't document everything. You didn't necessarily even keep your work. It was for something like, you just did it and you kind of moved on to the next project. So when NFTs first came out and there was those, $1 million memes, I just thought it was hilarious like everybody else. And somebody said, oh, they're looking for early digital art. So I said, oh yeah, I used to do that stuff back in the 80s. Called my mum and said, hey, have you got that box of stuff I left in the attic? And of course it's your mum, so she did. And because of that one act of her keeping that, I got all my archive, and all these images were all downloaded onto slides and videotape, etc. So basically I kind of revisited that thing. Now, what it did was it gave me a lot of pleasure of remembering those times that were more simple, more fun, great digital times. But I also managed to get hold of a Paintbox, got it working, learned how to do that, and showing other people, you just saw the pleasure on other people's faces. Like giving the kid a toy at Christmas, especially if it was a creative toy, and seeing them drawing and what they did was just a real pleasure. So I feel like I'm actually bringing it alive again by not just sitting there on my own doodling away, but bringing this community back together. So lots of people have gone back in their proverbial attic and brought out images and artwork. I've discovered work from Keith Haring that no one's ever seen, David Hockney, all these people, because people were like, oh yeah, I've got some of this that I'd forgotten about. So yeah, it sounds weird, but I feel that the art I'm doing at the moment is actually enabling all this art to come back out. My collection is kind of a little capsule of 6 years from 84 to 90. I didn't realize at the time, because I was in Manchester in an old textile warehouse where my studio was literally $30 a week, to rent this studio on this machine that was $150,000. And I was just beavering away trying to, hey, look at me, I'm doing this cool stuff. Is anyone interested? Do you want to do it? It was interesting because you did this stuff and you kind of created a portfolio, and my portfolio had to be big, photo slides, because there wasn't really a light box, and you'd have a light table in the old days where you'd show somebody your slides, or they'd hold it up to the window. I had a VHS tape, but nobody is going to play your folio on a VHS tape. So that kind of really saved me, because a lot of people worked on the Paintbox was just either to Quantel actual format, which is proprietary stuff like MO drives and 8-inch floppies, which you can't really read anymore. But mine was literally as a slide, which is like a it was a JPEG of its day. It was a 35mm slide. So they look as good as the day they were created as well, because they've sat in a box for 40 years, 30 years. So I've got this real snapshot of how, and again, this isn't to show off or anything like that, but it's just randomly, it ended up being this snapshot of the birth of digital photography, of digital photography manipulation anyway. It seems like I've got quite a lot of stuff, but compared to what you were doing, it was minimal because you didn't save everything. In those days, it was a cost to save it, to film, you're a student as well, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, lots was lost, but what does remain is a really interesting snapshot of everything, which was just a funny meme to my friends at Christmas, right through to something that was in, a really important art exhibition, digital art exhibition in 1988, or was in SIGGRAPH books. I think, to me, what makes any art valuable is what it conveys to somebody else. I'm not really into decorative art. I think you should look at something and it either makes you question something, think something. My job as an artist is not to tell you what to think, but to encourage you to think. So whether it's this image here, any of these images around me, they should be visually interesting. But behind that, there should be something that if you start to look at it, it's got layers to it, and the more layers you look, the more things that you find interesting about it. So that to me is what makes a good piece of art. Yeah, I think memes are fantastic. They really are. Even if America's Funniest Videos, somebody tripping up, falling, the Buster Keaton slapstick, that's kind of where memes come from. It's always some funny twist in the tail, visual pun or whatever, or some disaster thing going on. Or there's a big tradition of caricature. When politics and the world and the economy, generally has gone a bit lopsided, you get caricaturists who take an image and distort that or whatever. And I think memes are something that are a modern caricaturist's way of talking about the world, where instead of lecturing somebody, you can point out the futility or the ridiculousness of some situation using a meme, or as I say, just as a funny joke. It's a visual joke, right? So yeah, what better in the world to make people just smile in a meme, really? So I think memes are fantastic. Whether they're a work of art is something that, whether anything is a work of art is always decided by somebody else. If I call myself an artist, I probably am not an artist. If somebody else and a group of people call you an artist, you probably are. So I think the idea that whether you think it's art makes it art is irrelevant. It's a consensus. I think it's fantastic that AI allows more people to do more things. You know, it's kind of a snobby and a restrictive idea to say, hey, you're not a photographer, you can't have a camera on your phone, you're not good enough, you're not trained, so you can't have one. Creativity isn't a unionized thing. The idea is that you democratize creativity and art and expression, and then more people can express things. So I, as a photographer, I'm not worried, or as an artist, I'm not worried that there are other artists doing similar things, better things, or whatever. If I'm enjoying it and I'm doing something, then that's the pleasure of creativity. So yeah, there are always downsides to every technology. There's always downsides to every culture. You know, I follow Manchester United. I used to love that. There's loads of downsides now. They're not doing very well. It's terrible. So you can't just have something that's really enjoyable and have no downside to it. So you should recognize those downsides. You should hopefully put some guardrails. You know, there was a thing where people have forgotten about this now, but I remember there were these images that were created maybe 10 years ago where there were gigapixel images. And a digital image that would have so much information in it that you could just keep zooming forever and different people would get different things out of it. When you see those pictures of the galaxy that are created by NASA or whoever, that's not how it looks. It's a digital recreation of the digital information so that we can visually understand it. It's showing how small we are, how much information that we have to learn, and also how amazing digital is, that we can use digital to make sense of the world around us that we can't actually visually see. So I would say either one of those giant gigapixel things of the galaxy, or just one of the latest, best views of the galaxy taken with our technology that we've got now, that maybe in 1,000 years people go, God, they thought the galaxy was that small, or they thought it was that color. What? You know, when they talk about dinosaurs and they say, well, actually they have feathers, right? The consensus is they had feathers, but we just, you know, we're not having feathers on dinosaurs. Like we're used to it. So I would say that digital image will be a point of our knowledge and also our perception of the world around us. InkPoster to me is the direction to go in, because it's not trying to solve that 40-year-old problem, which is how we display digital art in our room that doesn't necessarily look like digital art. It's done digitally, but it's shown in a conventional way, even though the technology is actually digital. So I really like the idea that it's got all the benefits of screen art, where you can change the image and, you know, change it to your mood, etc. But it's not so obtrusive that it's glowing like a TV and your brain automatically links it to a screen, to screen-based art.